Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into some seriously fascinating core philosophies and psychological frameworks presented by a creator named Yasminn over on her channel just to see what happens. We're going to unpack a pretty jarring philosophical thesis she puts forward. The premise is bold, and it's basically this. Reality itself is completely meaningless. Objectively speaking, she argues there's no inherent instruction manual, no built-in purpose attached to anything that happens to us. Events simply unfold. Things just exist.
And right out of the gate, that is a really tough pill to swallow. Just asking the question, what if nothing actually matters, almost feels instinctively wrong, you know? As humans, we live these deeply emotional, highly charged lives. Think about it, when you experience profound grief or incredible joy, or when you're fighting tooth and nail for a cause you believe in, how could anyone possibly look at those deeply lived experiences and say they have objectively no meaning? It just feels like it goes against our very nature.
Right, totally understandable. So let's move into part 1, the story-making machine, and how exactly we go about assigning that meaning.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we actually process the world. To address that friction you just mentioned, Yasminn clarifies that reality itself is just a blank slate. The meaning doesn't live in the event, it lives in us. We're basically walking, talking, meaning-making machines. We are biologically and psychologically wired to assign value to absolutely everything. We're the ones layering reality with, actually no, we're not just layering it, we're writing the entire script in real time. And that machine is programmed by very specific filters that actively shape our experiences. First up, family modeling. Those early reactions you grow up around that teach you, okay, this is safe and that is a threat. Then, educational systems train us through a cycle of praise and neglect. Add to that our economic context, which define meaning around scarcity and abundance, basically deciding what carries weight and what doesn't. And finally, you have these massive cultural narratives stepping in to define the whole shebang. Success, love, morality.
Okay, but here's where I really have to push back a little bit. If you look at this comparison, reality just unfolding out there versus the human experience instantly judging and measuring everything in here, it highlights a massive, massive challenge. Because these filters, they aren't just light suggestions. They are deeply ingrained by heavy systemic forces. We are talking about childhood conditioning, basic economic survival, even the very language we use to think. It feels virtually impossible to just flip a switch and shut off the machine. We can't just unlearn the concepts of threat or success on a whim, right?
Which is a completely fair point, and it brings us nicely to part 2, the empty boat theory, which is actually a Taoist parable.
I completely agree with your pushback, and Yasminn fully acknowledges how deeply embedded all of this is. It's an enormous challenge to step outside a filter you've worn your entire life. But to help us actually navigate this, she introduces a highly practical tool. The parable goes like this. Imagine you're just flowing down a river in your little boat, and suddenly, boom, another boat violently crashes into yours. Instantly, you're furious. You're ready to yell, ready to give the person steering that boat a piece of your mind. But then you look over and you realize the other boat is completely empty. It just drifted into yours. Instantly, all that raging anger dissolves. Why? Because there was no malicious driver. There was no bad intention. It was literally just an event that happened. Let's move to the next step and see how this builds into our daily psychological habits. Yasminn maps out the logic of human suffering in 4 distinct steps. Step 1, an external event happens. The boat hits yours. Step 2, the mind instantly assigns personal meaning. Hey, they did this to me on purpose. Step 3, the narrative centers entirely around your own ego. And step 4, the suffering begins. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that the suffering wasn't caused by the physical collision of the boats. It was caused entirely by the meaning your mind assigned to that collision. And what's really fascinating is how Yasminn scales this metaphor to our everyday reality. She argues that most of the boats in your life, they're empty. The friend who was cold to you at lunch, the driver who aggressively cut you off in traffic, the colleague who completely ignored your email. They are usually just lost in their own personal chaos, navigating their own storms. They drift into you, sure, but there's no targeted agenda. They are empty boats. All right, let's unpack that a bit more in part 3, debating the filter's power in systemic conditioning. Okay, theoretically, that sounds incredibly liberating, but let's question the real-world practicality of this philosophy for a second. How does someone simply unassigned meaning when facing a deeply personal insult or intentional workplace politics? It is one thing to say a bad driver is an empty boat. It's a whole other ballpark when you're dealing with intentional workplace sabotage, a toxic relationship, or systemic cultural discrimination.
And that right there is the ultimate tension of this whole theory. But I would argue, based on Yasminn's material, that recognizing the empty boat is exactly how you reclaim your power from those systemic filters. It's about realizing that even if someone is directly spewing venom at you, their venom is about their conditioning, their ego, their fears. Their boat is still completely empty of objective meaning regarding your actual worth.
Right, I get that. But acknowledging that logically doesn't always override the raw physiological reaction. When decades of childhood conditioning and societal expectations have drilled into you that a certain failure or a certain rejection defines your worth, your nervous system responds as if that boat is very much full and heavily armed. Telling yourself it's just an empty boat in that moment feels like trying to stop a freight train with a sticky note. Perfectly said. Which leads us directly into part 4, escaping the meaning trap by changing the observer.
So the crucial point is exactly why we have to look at the synthesis of these two ideas. Yasminn freely admits that the mind is literally designed to seek identification. You cannot destroy the meaning-making machine, but you can change your relationship to it. You escape the trap by changing how you observe the stories it generates. And the ultimate solution she offers for this? Curiosity. Curiosity is how we loosen the ego's grip. When you start treating life like a living lab, you stop taking everything so personally. Choices become variables to test, not these massive, rigid commitments that define your entire identity. When an empty boat hits you, instead of immediately getting defensive, curiosity allows you to just observe the impact without internalizing it.
You know, I actually really appreciate this synthesis. By acting like a scientist in our own lives, we fundamentally lower our guard. We start treating our own emotions and habits not as this fixed, unchangeable identity, but just as data points. If you get furious when an empty boat hits you, the scientist in you asks, fascinating. Why did my machine assign that specific meaning to that event? It stops us from constantly bracing for impact, and instead opens us up to asking a much better question. Why is this happening for me? It creates this amazing buffer between the event itself and our reaction to it.
Exactly, it creates space. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. We want to turn this philosophy right back over to you. Take a look at the frustrations, the anxieties, or the ongoing conflicts happening in your life right now. What empty boats are you currently treating as calculated personal attacks? If you took a step back tomorrow and viewed them purely with curiosity, how does your story change? Thank you so much for exploring this with us. Keep questioning, and we'll see you in the next one.
I mean, we spend like the vast majority of our waking lives operating under this really specific, deeply comforting hallucination.
Yeah, a very comforting one.
Right. It's the assumption that the world around us comes with, like a built-in instruction manual. We just assume that the events we experience have this inherent objective significance woven directly into their DNA.
Exactly, like it's just a given.
Yeah. Like a promotion at work intrinsically means you are valuable. Or, a sudden breakup objectively means you're flawed. Or even just a traffic jam when you're already running late is clearly a sign that the universe is actively conspiring against your success.
It's out to get you.
Right. We walk through our days trusting that the meaning of what happens to us is just out there, waiting to be read like a label stuck to the side of a physical object.
And, it's a fundamental mechanism of human sanity to assume those labels are real.
Is it really just about sanity, though?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the alternative is almost impossible for the nervous system to process out of nowhere. If you suddenly strip away the assumption that events carry intrinsic meaning, you are left staring into a literal void.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're forced to confront the idea that the universe does not care about your narrative. It doesn't care about your timeline or your emotional state. And that is, it's the purest form of existential vertigo.
Vertigo is the perfect word for it.
Okay.
And inducing a little bit of that vertigo is exactly what we're setting out to do today.
It's going to be a fun one.
So welcome to this deep dive. And we've meticulously crafted and custom-tailored this journey just for you.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to unpack this highly specific, intellectually rigorous, and frankly kind of confronting philosophical theme.
Extremely confronting.
Yeah. It's presented by a YouTube creator named Yasminn on her channel, which is called Just to See What Happens. Now, we are putting aside her broader lifestyle content, the business advice and all that.
Right, we're filtering all of that out today.
Right, exactly. We are zeroing in entirely on one central existential claim that she makes, which is that reality itself is completely meaningless.
Which sounds so heavy when you just drop it like that.
It really does. She argues that humans are relentless, basically story-making machines, and we are frantically spinning narratives to avoid the terror of an indifferent universe. So we're going to deconstruct how these narratives are built, and ultimately we're going to explore how recognizing this architecture specifically through this Taoist empty boat theory might radically alter the way you experience daily suffering.
And I think setting the parameters of this exploration early is super crucial here, because the minute you say the phrase reality is completely meaningless, it immediately triggers these cultural associations with nihilists.
Like, oh, nothing matters, let's just give up.
Right, exactly. And I want to assure you, the listener, that our destination today is not this dark, hopeless apathy where nothing matters. It's not that at all.
So what is it then?
Well, rather, we're engaging in a psychological and philosophical teardown of the mechanics of perception. We're looking at the actual specific machinery inside your mind that assigns value, weight, and threat to the external world.
Because if you don't understand the machine, you're just a victim of it.
Precisely. By understanding how the machine operates, you stop being an involuntary product of it. This whole journey is really designed to challenge the very foundation of your internal monologues.
Okay, so let's start by analyzing that foundation. Because Yasminn's premise, it requires a total paradigm shift. She states that, objectively speaking, reality has no built-in instructions. Events simply happen.
Situations just unfold.
Yeah, situations unfold. Physics dictate the collision of matter. But the universe itself does not assign a moral or emotional weight to any of it. An event is just raw data.
Right. Consider it from a strictly empirical standpoint. The universe consists of atoms interacting in sequence. That's it. A rainstorm is simply atmospheric pressure and condensation.
It's literally just water falling.
Exactly. It carries no malice toward the wedding planner whose outdoor event is completely ruined. A text message left unread is, at a physical level, literally just digital packets of data sitting on a server somewhere.
It contains no objective judgment of your worth.
None. Yet humanity stands entirely alone in the animal kingdom in our absolute refusal to let a rainstorm just be water, or a silence just be an absence of sound.
We possess this unique cognitive mutation that rejects reality as it is.
We really do. We find the blank canvas genuinely terrifying.
Because if the canvas is blank, we don't know who we are in relation to it, right? Like, we have no context for ourselves.
That's the core of it. We need the context.
So we compulsively layer that raw, unfiltered reality with myths, significance, complex interpersonal dramas. When Yasminn calls us story-making machines, it isn't like a cute metaphor about enjoying fiction. It is a literal description of our default neurobiological operating system.
We actually cannot perceive raw reality. We can only perceive the story we instantly generate about it.
That is wild.
Yeah.
And the desperation for that narrative is woven into every single level of human behavior. Like, she notes how we aggressively scan for meaning in completely random phenomena.
Oh, absolutely. People will stare at the random shapes of condensation in a cloud and declare it a definitive sign from a deceased relative.
Or you see sequential numbers on a digital clock, like those angel numbers, right? 11.11 or whatever.
Yes. And we assign them this massive cosmic weight regarding our life path.
We even do it with the cold, hard mathematics of technology. Like, think about the personalized video feeds we all scroll through every day.
The algorithm.
The algorithm. You are looking at a system explicitly engineered by a massive corporation to maximize your attention through, like, predictive behavioral modeling.
It serves you a highly specific video because millions of data points suggest you will watch it for exactly 12 seconds.
Exactly. Yet when a video perfectly aligns with our current emotional struggle, what do? We call it destiny.
It's so true. We genuinely believe the universe sent us a TikTok.
We really do. We are so desperate to be characters in a grand narrative that we dress up corporate cognitive bias in the robes of divine intervention. That's actually hilarious when you think about it.
It is, but the crucial element to understand here is that this story making is not a purely intellectual exercise.
What do you mean? Like, it's not just a thought?
Right. It doesn't arrive as an abstract philosophical proposition that you just ponder from a distance. The meaning-making machine is hardwired directly into your endocrine system.
Wait, really? Into the body?
Yes. When your brain assigns a negative meaning to a neutral event, it doesn't just lodge a thought in your prefrontal cortex, it triggers a massive cascade of physical reactions.
So the body literally believes the story.
Completely. If you decide that an unreturned email means you are definitely about to be fired, your amygdala fires, your chest tightens, your breathing becomes shallow, and cortisol floods your bloodstream.
You are literally preparing to fight or flee
Yeah.
based entirely on a fiction your brain authored like 3 seconds prior.
You've taken an empty event, constructed a terrifying narrative around it, and your biological organism is now suffering the very real physical consequences of a threat that does not exist in the physical world.
It's like, okay, it's as if reality is a giant Rorschach ink blot test.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, the ink is just ink. It's objectively meaningless, right? Just a random splatter of chemicals on paper. But as a species, we are neurotically obsessed with declaring that the ink is definitely a butterfly, or a monster, or a reflection of our deepest unhealed trauma.
We can't just let it be ink.
No. And here is where the mechanism gets totally wild. We look at the splatter of ink, we consciously invent the monster, and then our heart rate spikes in genuine terror of the monster we just created.
It's self-sabotage on a biological level.
We are scaring ourselves to death with our own artwork.
Because the ink contains no inherent danger, right?
Yeah.
But your interpretation of the ink dictates your physiological reality.
Okay, but wait. I have to introduce some friction here. I have to push back a little.
Go for it.
If the meaning isn't inherently located in the event, if the ink is just ink, as we're saying, where exactly are we sourcing the raw materials to build these specific, highly personalized stories?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right, because I don't sit down at my desk every morning, pull out a notepad, and consciously write a script that makes me feel anxious and insecure. The stories assemble themselves autonomously in milliseconds. So where is this story-making machine pulling its code from?
Okay, so answering that question pushes us directly into the hidden architecture of human psychology. You aren't writing these scripts from scratch every morning because you are filtering raw reality through a deeply ingrained, pre-installed operating system.
A pre-installed operating system.
Exactly. Yasminn systematically breaks down the origins of this meaning filter. She demonstrates that the exact same objective reality lands entirely differently for you than it does for someone else.
Why? Just because of how we're raised?
Yes, because of the specific overlapping environments that programmed your machine from birth.
So the hardware might be universally human, but the software is hyperlocal.
Precisely the distinction we need to make. The source outlines 4 primary pillars that construct this psychological software. The foundational layer, predictably, is family.
Right, family always comes first in psychology.
It does, but this goes far beyond just genetic inheritance. This is the realm of early emotional modeling and attachment theory.
So like the silent treatments, the yelling, all of that.
Exactly. The reactions, silences, and micro-expressions you were exposed to in your formative years, they literally wired your nervous system's definitions of love, safety, and existential threat.
Let's apply that practically, because I think people need an example here. If you grew up in an environment where a caregiver's silence was like the immediate precursor to emotional volatility or punishment.
The calm before the storm.
Right, exactly. Then your filter is permanently coded to view a quiet room as a dangerous room. Your nervous system interprets the absence of noise as the presence of a threat.
It assumes danger is coming.
Yeah. So 20 years later, when your partner is quietly reading a book across the room, you feel a spike of panic. The reality is just a person reading. But the story your machine produces is that you are in danger.
It's wild. And building upon that family layer is the immense structural weight of our educational system.
Yeah.
Right. These institutions, they don't just impart facts, they install complex hierarchies of meaning through standardized mechanisms of praise, reward, punishment, and neglect.
They teach you, systematically, what forms of intelligence are socially valuable.
Yeah.
And what forms render you completely invisible.
Exactly. They train you to measure your internal worth against an external, totally arbitrary metric, a letter grade, a test score.
But we have to dig even deeper here, into the third pillar, because this one dictates almost every waking hour of our adult lives. And that's the economic context.
Ah, yes. The economic filter.
The economic environment you are raised in, and the one you currently inhabit, trains your attention to scan for very specific data points. And we aren't just talking about, like, keeping a budget. We're talking about how capitalism, or frankly any macroeconomic structure, wires your nervous system for scarcity or abundance.
It assigns the existential weight of actual survival to abstract concepts like money and productivity.
Exactly. It's life or death.
And the economic filter is arguably the most insidious one because it masquerades as the natural order of the world. It dictates that your productivity is synonymous with your right to exist comfortably.
So if your meaning filter was forged in poverty or just deep economic instability, your machine is constantly running a background program scanning for loss.
Always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Right. A minor unexpected expense doesn't just mean you have less money. Your story-making machine interprets it as a massive step toward total ruin.
It's an existential threat. And wrapping around all of these family, education, economy is the final all-encompassing pillar, cultural narratives.
The big one.
The big one. These are the invisible mythologies that dictate success, morality, status, and desirability. And what really reveals the artificial nature of these narratives is how wildly they fluctuate across borders.
It's so true. What feels incredibly meaningful, urgent, and, worth dying for in one culture can feel entirely empty, absurd, or even offensive in another.
To understand the structural permanence of these cultural filters, Yasminn introduces some heavy sociopolitical frameworks. She specifically references the psychiatrist and philosopher Frantz Fanon.
Oh, Fanon. His work is brilliant.
It is. Fanon's work extensively explored how marginalized individuals internalize the image of who they are through the lens of the dominant power structure.
So the people in power dictate the self-image of the oppressed.
Exactly. Systems of class, race, patriarchy, and colonialism do not just oppress from the outside. They actively install a meaning filter inside the minds of the oppressed.
They basically write the script for the marginalized person's story-making machine. That is a devastating concept.
It really is.
Fanon is essentially arguing that society teaches you exactly how much space you are allowed to take up. If you constantly apologize for existing, if you inherently feel that your voice is an imposition that isn't just a personal quirk or, biological shyness.
No, it's not.
That is a meaning filter installed by a historical power structure to ensure you police your own behavior. You have literally internalized your own subjugation as an objective truth about your worth.
That's exactly it. Furthermore, she invokes the sociologist Emil Durkheim, who introduced the concept of the collective consciousness.
What's the collective consciousness in this context?
Durkheim argued that society is bound together by shared moral codes and invisible rules of behavior. These aren't written laws, but agreed upon social facts.
Unspoken rules.
Right. And we absorb these rules so thoroughly during our socialization process that they feel like the immutable laws of physics. We believe that wearing certain clothes to a funeral is an objective, universal sign of respect, rather than a highly specific, socially constructed agreement.
Right, because if you don't do it, you feel physical shame. And the mechanism that locks all of this conditioning into place, the actual code that writes the software, is language.
Yes, language is the key.
Yasminn's perspective on language is perhaps the most paradigm-shifting aspect of her entire thesis, in my opinion. She refers to words as the first act of separation.
Which is such a profound way to look at it.
It really forces us to reconsider the very nature of human communication. The idea is that the moment you name a thing, you sever yourself from the actual experience of it. You wrap this raw, living reality in a static, heavily burdened definition.
Language stabilizes the meaning filter. Let me give you an example. Consider the internal experience of physiological arousal. Your heart beats faster, your palms sweat, your stomach flutters.
Okay, I know that feeling.
Right. Now, if you are standing at the top of a roller coaster, you might tag that physical sensation with the word excitement.
Sure.
But if you are standing at a podium about to give a speech, you might tag the exact same physiological sensation with the word anxiety.
Oh, wow.
The moment you apply the word anxiety, you are no longer just feeling a bodily sensation. You have loaded that fluttering stomach with every cultural stigma, every medical definition, and every past personal failure associated with the concept of anxiety.
You literally trap yourself in the linguistic construct.
Exactly. You build a cage out of a word.
Let's conceptualize this using modern technology because I think it helps visualize it. It operates exactly like a pair of highly advanced augmented reality or AR glasses.
I love this analogy. Let's run with it.
Imagine we were all born into this world, right? And the moment we open our eyes, society straps these AR glasses to our heads. The software in the glasses is coded by our parents' traumas, our educational traumas, our economic scarcity, and Fanon's power dynamics.
It's all loaded in there.
All of it. And we walk around completely convinced we are looking at the raw, objective code of the universe. We think we are seeing reality, but we're actually looking at a scarcity filter or an unworthy filter superimposed directly over the raw data of the world.
And the real danger of those AR glasses is that they do not just passively tint the world a different color.
What do?
They actively edit the data you are allowed to perceive.
Okay, which introduces a terrifying philosophical trap.
It really does.
If our deepest desires, our core fears, and the very meanings we assign to our lives are entirely programmed by external societal structures, is any of it truly ours?
That's the scariest question of all.
Right. The source references the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, who posited that human desire is always the desire of the other.
Lacan is perfect here.
We don't independently want a luxury car or a specific body type or a corporate title. We want what the cultural structure has signaled is valuable. So are we genuinely nothing more than biological algorithms running scripts written by dead sociologists and traumatized ancestors?
It is a bleak proposition. And the mechanics of the brain only reinforce how deeply trapped we are in that algorithmic loop.
Because the brain hates being wrong.
Exactly. Because our AR glasses are not just a static lens. They are a highly aggressive defense mechanism. The meaning filter actively fights for its own survival. It demands to be proven right.
And this leads us to the neurobiological reality of confirmation bias and the self-fulfilling prophecy.
So the filter doesn't just passively interpret data. It aggressively seeks out specific data to justify its own existence.
Exactly, the dynamic Yasminn highlights by referencing the pioneering psychologist William James.
Yes, William James noted that belief creates the actual fact. Your brain functions as an incredibly efficient predictive engine.
Because your internal scripts, those foundational beliefs like, I am fundamentally unlovable or people are inherently selfish and will betray me, they feel like objective, life-or-death reality to your nervous system.
Right. Your brain genuinely believes your survival depends on those scripts being true. It cannot afford the cognitive dissonance of being wrong. So the reticular activating system in your brain acts as a literal bouncer.
A bouncer at a club.
Exactly. It scans the environment exclusively for evidence that validates your script while actively blocking out any data that contradicts it.
It creates a personalized echo chamber right behind your eyes.
It really does.
Let's map this out in a real-world scenario that the source provided, because this really hit home for me. Imagine your core unhealed script is that you are always ignored, that your presence just doesn't matter.
Okay, a very common script.
Very common. So you walk into a crowded social gathering. There are 30 people in the room. 29 of them are engaged in conversation. Some are looking your way. Someone even smiles at you from the bar.
Positive data everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
But your brain bypasses all of that data and locks in, like a laser-guided missile, on the one single person sitting in the corner staring down at their phone while you introduce yourself to the group.
And in a fraction of a second, the story-making machine declares victory. It says, look, I told you, we are invisible. No one cares.
Yep. You have gathered highly selective, deeply biased data to solidify a pre-existing hallucination. The tragedy here is that you genuinely did not process the person smiling at you.
You literally didn't see them.
Your brain filtered them out because they threaten the integrity of your script.
It's real-time emotional justification.
Yeah.
Yasminn emphasizes how deeply uncomfortable we are with pure, unassigned emotion.
We hate it. We can't stand just feeling something without a reason.
Right. When a heavy, difficult feeling arises, say, a sudden wave of sadness or a spike of anger, we refuse to just sit with the physical sensation. The machine panics. It demands a reason. It demands a villain.
So it instantly invents a narrative to justify the physical feeling. We blame the person on their phone. We blame the state of the world. We construct an entire cinematic universe of betrayal and malice just to rationalize why our chest feels tight on a Tuesday afternoon.
And the philosophical consequence of living trapped inside this self-justifying simulation is profound isolation.
You're completely alone in there.
Yasminn introduces the existential philosopher Martin Buber to articulate this cost. Buber famously delineated human interaction into two categories: the I-it relationship and the I-thou relationship.
I and I thou. Break that down for us.
When we are operating heavily through our AR glasses, scanning the world to validate our insecurities, we are stuck in the I-it mode. We cease to view other people as complex, sovereign human beings with their own inner worlds. We reduce them to predictable, static objects.
We turn them into props.
Props designed to play a specific role in our personal tragedy.
We turn the person on their phone into the ignorer NPC in our video game. rather than considering they might be receiving, like, devastating medical news via text right in that moment.
Exactly. And by reducing them to a prop, you entirely annihilate the possibility of an I-thou connection.
Because the I-thou state requires what? Openness?
Right. It requires encountering the full, unpredictable, unscripted reality of another human being with total openness. You cannot truly connect with someone if you are only interacting with the projection of your own trauma that you have painted onto their face.
Okay, but wait. Untangling this in a theoretical discussion is one thing, right? But living it is another.
Of course.
If my mind is so desperate for its stories to be true that it literally doctors my visual and emotional reality, how do I practically escape? If my own neurological hardware is designed to deceive me for the sake of efficiency, aren't we entirely trapped in the simulation?
It feels like it, doesn't it?
Like, how do you argue with a brain that is actively hiding the evidence of your own worth?
The friction you are identifying right now is the root cause of almost all psychological suffering. We suffer immensely because our tightly held, incredibly self-centered, hallucinated narratives constantly collide with the unpredictable, objectively meaningless events of the real world.
The world doesn't care about our script.
Right. Reality refuses to obey the script we wrote for it. And that disobedience feels like absolute agony. And it is precisely this agonizing friction that brings this deep dive to its absolute philosophical climax, the empty boat theory.
The empty boat parable.
Yeah.
It's an ancient Taoist concept traditionally attributed to Chuangzi. And its simplicity completely belies how violently it attacks the ego.
It really goes right for the throat of the ego.
It does. It goes like this. You are sitting in a small wooden boat floating peacefully down a dense, foggy river. Suddenly, out of the mist, another boat crashes violently into the side of yours.
Okay, so a collision.
A collision.
Yeah.
And your immediate biological reaction is absolute rage. Your blood boils, you clench your fists, you stand up ready to scream at the incompetent, thoughtless idiot steering the other boat who just ruined your peaceful morning.
You're ready to fight.
You turn around, fully loaded with venom, and you look.
And the boat is empty.
Nobody's there. Nobody.
Yeah.
It just slipped its moorings upstream, drifted down the river, and bumped into you. And in that exact fraction of a second, the anger completely evaporates. It just vanishes into thin air.
The critical inquiry here is analyzing the mechanics of that evaporation. Why does the anger disappear?
Because the story-making machine suddenly loses its villain. Without a person in the boat, there is no malicious intent, there is no one to blame.
Exactly. The crash wasn't an attack. It was just physics, water currents, and wood. It was an entirely meaningless event.
And Yasminn applies this ancient parable to modern psychology with just devastating precision. She demands that we ask ourselves a terrifying question. What if the vast majority of the boats crashing into you in your daily life are actually empty?
It is a question that completely decenters the ego.
Completely.
It forces you to look at how desperately your mind requires a personal narrative to make sense of pain.
Let's look at the daily collisions, you know. A close friend cancels lunch plans 20 minutes before you're supposed to meet. A driver aggressively cuts you off on the highway, nearly causing an accident. A colleague ignores an urgent email for 2 days.
Everyday stuff.
Everyday stuff. But your meaning-making machine instantly, automatically places you at the absolute center of the narrative. The script screams, "My friend canceled because they don't value my time," or "That driver cut me off because I am invisible and people disrespect me."
We take chaotic, completely impersonal events and passionately hallucinate a malicious captain steering the boat, actively trying to ram into our hull.
We take the sheer randomness of human behavior and twist it into a targeted referendum on our personal worth.
But the reality of the empty boat theory suggests that the friend who canceled, the driver who swerved, the colleague who went silent, they are not thinking about you at all.
Not even a little bit.
They are completely consumed by navigating their own catastrophic internal storms. The friend is having a panic attack. The driver is late to a hospital. The colleague is overwhelmed by impending burnout.
They lose control of their vessel and they just drift into yours.
Yes. The collision hurts, yes. But it is entirely fundamentally impersonal.
The existential takeaway from this is staggering. The vast majority of the suffering in our lives is not generated by the event itself.
The physical bump of the empty boat is just a bump. It requires a minor correction, perhaps a deep breath.
But the prolonged suffering, the days of ruminating anxiety, the deep-seated bitterness that is manufactured entirely by the meaning your mind assigned to the bump.
The suffering is the story.
Okay, I have to push back hard here, because applying this cleanly to the real world feels dangerous. Let's abandon the minor inconveniences, right?
Yeah.
Out in the messy, often cruel, real world, Some boats absolutely have people in them.
That's true.
Some people are highly toxic, deeply manipulative, and they act with deliberate, calculated malice. If someone actively tries to sabotage my career or betrays my trust, my nervous system doesn't care about their internal storm. That is not an empty boat. That is a pirate ship.
A pirate ship, I like that.
How do I practically bypass my biology and use this theory without becoming just a passive, overly forgiving doormat who accepts abuse?
That is the most vital pushback to this theory, and navigating that distinction is where the true psychological work lies. The empty boat theory does not advocate for pacifism in the face of harm.
It doesn't mean you just let them sink you.
No, it does not ask you to let people destroy your boat. The theory is about untangling the action of the other person from the meaning you assign to your own self-worth.
Okay, separate the action from the meaning.
Right. Even if a person is standing at the helm of their boat, staring you dead in the eye as they ram into you with explicit malice, their malice is still an empty boat regarding your value.
Wait, explain that mechanism. How is malice empty?
Because their decision to attack you is entirely a product of their own deeply broken script. It is a reflection of their unhealed trauma, their Fanon-esque internalization of power, their warped AR glasses. It is a manifestation of their sickness. It is not an objective mathematical truth about your unlovability.
Wow. Okay, so the action is real, the damage is real, but the meaning I extract from the idea that I deserved it or that I am fundamentally flawed because I was targeted, that is the hallucination.
Exactly. You are required to set a boundary. You are required to protect your hull, to push the other boat away, or to navigate to a different river entirely.
But you do not have to absorb their brokenness as a judgment on your soul.
Exactly. You recognize that even the pirates are just victims of their own terrible story-making machines.
If we can truly internalize this,
Yeah.
if we can accept that we are constantly centering our egos in a meaningless universe full of empty drifting boats, and that our anguish is largely self-generated by our AR glasses, the final practical step is figuring out how to take the glasses off.
How to pull the plug on the machine.
Right. If the software is running automatically, how do we hack the system? How do we step out of the center of the universe and actually reclaim our peace?
Reclaiming your agency requires understanding that you do not have to remain a hostage to the story-making machine. The philosopher Viktor Frankl famously noted that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom.
The space before the story starts.
Right. The key is learning how to artificially widen that space. You have to learn how to pull the emergency brake on the script before the software fully boots up and takes over your nervous system.
But Yasminn points out a massive psychological roadblock here.
The ego.
The ego. Letting go of the narrative requires letting go of the identity we have meticulously constructed around it, and the human ego will fight to the death to prevent that.
Oh, it hates breaking character.
We stay fiercely loyal to heavy, bitter, exhausting emotions because dropping the story feels like breaking character. If I have spent 20 years playing the role of the misunderstood victim, who am I if I suddenly drop the script and choose peace?
Dropping the story feels indistinguishable from ego death.
Yes.
You have calcified your personality around your wounds. To heal the wound means losing the architecture of your identity. So, the machine will actively convince you that staying angry is safer than stepping into the unknown blank canvas of a new identity.
So how do we trick the ego? How do we break character without triggering a psychological defense mechanism?
The source material suggests a brilliant, somatic exercise designed to bypass the intellectual defenses of the ego entirely. It's the practice of observing rather than naming.
Oh, going back to language.
Yes, we return to the concept of language as the first act of separation. Yasminn challenges the listener to sit with a heavy, difficult emotion for just 60 seconds without attaching a single linguistic label to it.
No vocabulary allowed. You can't call it grief. You can't call it rage. You can't call it anxiety.
None of that. And most importantly, you absolutely cannot attach a narrative of why it is happening.
No blaming the guy who cut you off.
Exactly. You strip away the past and the future. You just drop into the body and experience the raw physical sensation. Notice the heat in your chest, the tension in your jaw, the specific rhythm of your breath.
Just feeling the hardware run, basically.
Right. By aggressively refusing to name the sensation, you starve the story-making machine of the code it needs to run. Without a word to latch onto, the brain cannot load up your childhood conditioning, it cannot access Fanon's cultural power dynamics, and it cannot project a worst-case scenario into the future.
It's just a sensation rising and falling in a meaningless universe.
Exactly.
That is a profound way to short-circuit the AR glasses. And she introduces another, almost playful method to break character, which she calls the joy of inefficiency and randomness.
I love this one.
If our brains are highly deterministic algorithms, obsessively trying to be perfectly efficient and proving our biases, the most effective way to glitch the simulation is to introduce chaotic data.
Do something totally wildly out of character.
Yes. Take a completely illogical route on your walk. Speak up in a meeting where you normally hide. Give a compliment you would usually swallow.
You introduce noise into the deterministic model. By doing something inefficient or unexpected, you provide undeniable physical proof to your nervous system that you are not locked into a rigid, inescapable script.
You prove to your own biology that you possess free will.
That you're not just a program running.
It is the psychological equivalent of realizing you are an actor who suffered amnesia on stage. Like you have been playing this incredibly heavy, tragic role for decades, reading a script handed to you by your culture and your economy, and you genuinely forgot you were acting.
You thought the play was reality.
The empty boat theory, the 60-second somatic observation, the acts of randomness, these are just the director finally yelling cut.
It snaps you out of the trance.
It does. You look around, you realize the towering mountains are just painted wood, the dialogue is just ink on paper, and you have the power to walk off the stage at any moment.
Which brings us to the ultimate lingering question regarding existential meaninglessness.
The fear of the void. Does giving up our assigned meaning, taking off the AR glasses, acknowledging that the ink blot is objectively just ink, accepting that the universe does not care about our narrative, does that make the human experience feel hollow? Does it make life feel empty? Or does it make it feel limitless?
The philosophical conclusion we must draw from Yasminn's framework is that the blank canvas is the only place where ultimate freedom exists.
Freedom from the script.
As long as you believe the universe is dictating your story, you are a victim of fate. But when you realize the meaninglessness of it all, when you realize the script pages are actually blank, you are finally unburdened. You are free to consciously choose in real time what stories you actually want to write next.
Let's weave all of these threads together because we have navigated some profoundly heavy, destabilizing philosophical terrain today.
We really went deep.
We began by confronting the terrifying reality that the universe is an objectively meaningless blank canvas, completely devoid of built-in instructions. We deconstructed how our families, our educational systems, our economic scarcity, and deeply ingrained cultural power dynamics scrap AR meaning filters to our faces, completely hijacking how we perceive reality.
And we exposed the mind's desperate algorithmic compulsion to confirm its own tragic stories through cognitive bias.
Exactly. And finally, we discovered a radical path to liberation in the empty boat theory. The realization that the collisions causing our suffering are largely devoid of malicious intent, and that our pain is a product of our own authorship.
It demands a complete neurological and spiritual restructuring of how you view your own suffering.
It really does.
And to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you step back into the chaos of your daily life.
Lay it on them.
If the universe truly does not owe you an explanation, and if you are fundamentally, objectively unimportant to the random sequence of events unfolding around you, what if that cosmic indifference is not a tragedy?
What if it's not a bad thing?
Right. What if it is the ultimate liberating permission slip? If the world isn't writing a story about you, you are finally free to pick up the pen and write it yourself.
A cosmic permission slip. I love that. The freedom of the empty boat. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. I encourage you to stay ruthlessly curious, question the AR glasses you rely on, and take an unflinching look at the stories you tell yourself today. Until next time.